Hello everyone and welcome to Altenew's September release. We're kicking off with a fabulous video hop with great prizes. I hope you'll hop along with us. I have 4 cards to share with you featuring September's Craft Your Life Project Kit Mixed Blooms. This kit is amazing with so many possibilities. I absolutely love it. Each of the cards are quite distinct from one another, giving you some insight into the versatility of the products in this kit. It is really fabulous. And just a reminder, as you hop along at each stop, leave a comment so that your name goes into this fabulous giveaway. All right then, let's get started with card 1. And for this one, I'll be using all of the products included in the kit. I love an ink blended background, and this hack will get you there very quickly and easily. This A2 size panel of indigo cardstock is being edged with jet black ink. Altenew sticky mats are my go-to whenever I do ink blending. The mat is sticky on both sides, securing it to the work surface and then securing the panel to the mat. The panel has been popped into the stamp wheel, and I'll start off by using one of the 2 stamps that are included in the stamp set. The stamps will produce the same image, but one is an outline, the other one is solid with textural aspects to it. I'll be using this one to create a shadow. Be stamped on this dark background with cloud white ink. There's lots of surface area to stamp, so a pressure tool is helpful. Flip my stamp over, and I'm going to be inking it a second time so that the image is much more distinct. This is such a cool stamp, and I really love the white ink on the dark background. This image with all of the details in the flowers and leaves could be used on its own. Another illustration of just how versatile this kit is. This card, I'm going to use it as a shadow. The outlined image is being stamped in black ink on white cardstock. I want the image to have a really nice, crisp, dark outline, so I'm flipping the stamp over and inking it up a second time. Before I start adding color, I like to let the ink dry completely, about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll be using the stencils from the 5-piece stencil set. The first stencil and the top of the second stencil will coordinate with the stamped image. The rest of the stencils will produce 2 independent floral designs. Only 3 separate stenciling sections. This is super easy and fast to color. I'm first going to add a base layer of color. For this first section of the stencil, I'll add Mountain Mist. There's an etched line between the 2 sections on this stencil, which indicates that it needs to be repositioned. For this second section, I'm going to continue with that base layer of the Mountain Mist. So now moving over to stencil 2 using the very top section only, I'll align that, and I'm going to apply Volcano Lake. The entire image has a base layer of a couple of shades of really soft green. Now I'll move into the blues. I've gone back to stencil 1 to that first section, realigned it, and I'm applying right at the base of all of the petals a pretty blue called Aqualicious. Now I'll go to the second half of this stencil and realign it, and this time I'm going to apply again right at the base to create a shadow area, Teal Cave. I thought at this point that I was finished with my coloring, but as it turns out, after I pulled the card together, I really wanted to deepen the contrast between the shadow and the highlight areas. So I deepened those shadow areas on a finished card, and you'll see that later. So for now, I've used the coordinating die, and I've die cut the image. And then the die cut is lined up with the image on the embossing folder. And I find it easiest to do this with it facing towards me. And I use a little bit of low tack tape just to hold it in place as it goes through the die cutter, and look at that beautiful dimension. Kneading die was also used to cut black sheet foam, and so now the arrangement can be stacked on it for some added dimension. Before the card front was adhered to an A2 size black card base, the simple sentiment, "You're the best," was embossed in silver in the corner. In addition to the outline die, the set also comes with another die that produces all of these sweet little details to create leafy branches. Everything was cut from silver glitter cardstock. I have my foam backed image just temporarily laid out so that I can create my 2 sprays on either side of it. Now I'll go ahead and adhere it to the card front, offsetting it on that soft white shadow. Some additional color will be added into the silver glitter sprays using the Tranquility enamel dots. I find it easiest to position these adhesive-backed embellishments using my craft pick. The pick is positioned right at the edge of each enamel dot. Give it a little push until it catches the adhesive, and then it can easily be moved over to my card front. So this is my finished card, but I really wanted to deepen the color in the shadow areas. I would have gone so far as to place the stencil back on top and add color that way, but my arrangement had been embossed, so I decided to use pencil crayon. At the base of all of the petals on the flowers, I'm adding in a dark blue. I also decided to brighten up my highlights by adding in some white. And then I finished up at the base of all of the leaves with a dark teal green. This card was finished up with some dot details on the flowers using Nouveau Crystal Drops Simply White. On to card 2. This pretty floral was created with the stencil set using stencils 4 and 5. Because there is no stamped image to line the stencils up to, I found it easiest to start with a piece of cardstock that was oversized. I'll be starting with stencil 4, which has been divided with etched lines into different stenciling sections. First section is positioned near the bottom of the panel, and I'm coloring it with strawberry. The first and third sections on the stencil lay the foundation for the flower bouquet. So I skipped the second section and went right to the third one so I'd have everything laid out. I continued working with strawberry. Now I'll go back to the detail sections, which are the second and fourth ones. The second one is lined up with the first set of flowers that were stenciled. And then, of course, the last section was lined up to the set of flowers that were stenciled at the top end of the panel. The last 2 stenciling applications were completed with dusty pink. I did refer to the illustrated guide, which is included with the stamp set. It maps everything out step by step. On to stencil 5, starting at the top, and I've pointed out where I'm going to be lining up this stencil to the floral image. This stencil will add detail to the center of the flowers using blush rose, and then also add in some foliage with firefly. After stenciling this last section, you can now see the full size of the floral design. The next section will add in some details on one of the flowers. The outline of this flower has been etched onto the stencil so it's easy to line up, and I'll continue with the blush rose. The third section will span just about the entire length of the floral design, adding in more details to the flower centers using berry mocha and to the foliage with grass fields. Last and final section to be stenciled will be done with Shadow Creek, adding in some depth to that foliage that is tucked in beneath those 3 larger flowers. Next, I'm going to trim down my panel. I'll keep it at full height for an A2 size card at 5.5 inches, but the width will be taken down to 3.25 inches. It will be adhered to the right-hand side of an A2 sized black card base. I'm going to add in some 1/4 inch wide gold glitter washi tape. I'm putting down a stream of glue just as an extra precaution so it won't lift up. And into the stamp wheel it goes, and I'm going to use one of the sentiments that is included in the stamp set. And I'm just double checking on the grid to make sure that it's lined up, and then it will be inked up in black. And because I'm stamping across the image, I'll ink up the sentiment a couple of times so that it's dark and crisp. The second stamping really helps it to stand out from the floral image. And after I've trimmed off the overhanging washi tape, then I'm going to use some gold embellishments from Metallic Gold and Silver Gem Sparkles. Like the previous card, Card 3 will use just the stencil set. We'll be working with stencils 2 and 3. First section on stencil 2 coordinates with the stamp set. The first flower was inked up with citrus bursts, and now I'm lining up that second section, and I'm going to use a combination of Sun Ray and Pink Pearl. The larger flower on the left-hand side is being colored with a yellow that is slightly darker than the first flower. The third flower in this little bouquet will be done in a pink that has some coral undertones to it. The third section will line up to the first flower that was stenciled. And for this one, I'm going to add in fresh lemon. The final section on stencil 2 will add details to the 2 large flowers. On the yellow flower, I'm using Snapdragon, and on that pinkish coral one, I'm using Coral Bliss. There are 2 stenciling sections on stencil 3. On each section, there is an etched flower which lines up to the very first flower that was stenciled. For the first section, Sun Ray was added to the center of the flowers, and then the foliage was completed with Firefly. And for the final section, Snapdragon, a deep yellow, was added to add more detail to the center of the flowers, and then the foliage was finished up with a dark green grass field. Both of the cards that had the stenciled images, as you may have noticed, I didn't worry about getting the images centered onto the panels. Where I began, I already had determined that I was going to be trimming them down. I knew it was going to be a little bit challenging to get them positioned exactly where I would want them on the panels, and so I took the easy way out. This panel was trimmed down to a 3.5 inch square. And I worked back and forth between the 2 opposite sides, trimming off just a little bit at a time. I find that this is the easiest and the safest way to get the image centered onto the trimmed panel. Using a fan brush and white gouache that has been watered down, I'm going to add a little bit of spatter. And I'm putting the sentiment in place where it's going to be stamped so that will mask it off, and I won't get any spatter in that area, which would be very difficult to stamp over. Any spatter that gets on the stamp wipes off very easily. This square panel will sit on dark green cardstock that is slightly larger than the panel. The main sentiment for this card will be die cut from the Timeless Sentiments 3 die set. Shine Bright was cut from the same dark green cardstock that was used to border the panel, and also white sheet foam. As you can see, I have not popped out my foam die cut. I've left it in place, and I'm adding adhesive to it. The foam sentiment will be slightly recessed in the background of the foam, and this makes it very easy to align the cardstock one to it. When working with foam, the drying time will be a little bit longer than if you were adhering cardstock to cardstock. I give it a good 15 minutes before the excess foam will be removed. And while it is drying, I can start pulling my card together. The panel is adhered to the dark green one. It's then popped into the stamp wheel. I can see very clearly the area that does not have spatter on it. Stamp is inked in black and stamped 2 times for a nice crisp sentiment. The panel is going to be popped up on foam which has been cut just slightly smaller than the overall size of the panel. And my foam back sentiment is dry, so now I can use my craft pick to release it safely from the excess foam without having to worry about it slipping out of alignment. Foam backed panel is going to be adhered to an A2 size card base. I make sure that the border at the top is the same width as those that will be on either side of it. The first word on the sentiment will be adhered directly to that foam back panel, and then the second portion of the sentiment will be adhered to the card base below it. The dot for the letter I is attached to the shine word, so I make sure that they line up. This card is finished up with dark green embellishments found in the Radiant Gems enamel dots. From light and airy to dark and rich, Mixed Blooms is so versatile. Now we're on to a Christmas card. I love the look of ink blended panels, but they can be time consuming, so I admit that I use this hack often. I'm applying black ink around the edges of a red cardstock panel that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Around the edges of the panel, more pressure is applied so that the black is saturated. And then as I bring it in towards the panel center, then I lighten it up. The panel is popped into the stamp wheel, and I'll be using that solid floral image and inking it up with black ink to create a shadow onto the panel. There's lots of surface area, so a pressure tool helps to transfer the ink evenly to the panel. Next, the outline of this floral is going to be stamped in black ink on white cardstock. I've placed my panel on a sticky mat, which I like to use when I'm going to be stenciling. The image for this card will be stenciled just like it was in the first card, but I'm going to be using some very rich colors to create a very ornate looking, almost Baroque Christmas card. The center flower, the largest, is going to be colored with ultraviolet. This is a very rich purple. Create lots of dimension. I'll apply more pressure at the base of the petals and then lighten the ink up as I move towards the outside edges. And I think you saw that I tapped off some of that ink on some paper towel before I finished the petal's edge. And these smaller blooms were done in Honey Drizzle and Heartbeat. All of the foliage will be colored with 2 shades of green. The dark green that I've just applied is Mountain Pine, and then I'll add a highlight area with a light green Firefly. This is the second half of stencil 2, and as you can see, I am not changing up my colors. I'm going to keep them all uniform and use the same inks that were used previously for all of the flowers. We'll though be adding in some cloud white at the edges of the petals to really brighten up that highlight. During the first stenciling on this flower, the center was colored in Heartbeat, and I'll continue with that at the base of the petals. Then I'll switch over to the cloud white to finish it off. The remainder of the foliage is colored using the same inks. Again, I'm introducing that white just right on the tips to brighten it up. And the stenciling will be finished up using the top section of stencil 2. Honey Drizzle is applied to the center of the flower and also to the petals on that top flower, finished off again with a little bit of the cloud white on the petal's edge. And the small flower on the left-hand side is done with the Heartbeat. I'm going to take it up a notch with ornate details, starting with some spatter using Distress Stain Tarnished Brass. Next, the panel will be edged in gold. I'll rub a Versamark pad around the edges of the panel, add in my gold embossing powder, and then using a paintbrush, I'll just even out those edges a little bit. And then of course finish it up by melting the embossing powder. And although I did 2 sides, you certainly could do 1 at a time or all 4 at the same time. The stenciled floral is cut with the coordinating die. To keep the overall appearance of the card dark and rich, I'm going to be using a Copic marker 110, that is the special black, and I'll be edging the floral plus coloring any of the white bits that are inside the design. So admittedly, this did take a little bit of time. It probably took me as long to do this as it did to stencil the entire floral, but I felt it was worth it. I thought the white would be too distracting. And then I used the coordinating die again to cut black sheet foam so I could pop up the floral on it and give it some nice dimension on the card front. And then I popped it in my spatter box and added tarnished brass to this as well. Sentiment for this card is from Timeless Sentiments 3. This is a beautiful set. There are sentiments not just for Christmas, but for everyday occasions as well. The die was used to cut matte gold cardstock and black sheet foam so it could be stacked. The red panel was adhered to an A2 size black card base in landscape orientation. When the foam-backed floral was adhered to the card front, it was slightly offset from the shadow, so edges of it would peek around it. And the card was finished up with the foam-backed sentiment, making sure that when it was adhered, the I, which is part of the piece die cut, lined up with the J in the joy. That wraps up this video, which I know is a little bit longer than what I normally do, but I really wanted to illustrate the versatility and range of cards that can be created with the Craft Your Life project kit. The link to your next stop in this video hop will be found in the description of this video. But before you go, make sure that you leave a comment and good luck in the giveaway.